Wisconsin. So let's discuss all of this with CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, Arizona State Chairman of the Trump campaign Jeff DeWitt, CNN national political reporter Maeve Reston, and Matthew Continetti, editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Great to have you all with us. Jeffrey, first to you, just from a legal point, Lewandowski has been charged with simple battery, right? How big of a deal is this legally?
Well, it's a misdemeanor, and I think it's a bigger deal politically than it is legally. You know, the legal rule, Pamela, as I'm sure you know, is you can't be hitting people. You can't be grabbing people. I mean, this is not a complicated legal case, and obviously it's extremely unlikely that this would ever go to trial. There's usually some sort of pretrial resolution of cases this minor, but it's certainly embarrassing, and the video, everybody can draw their own conclusions from what happened there, but it is yet another spectacle from the Trump campaign. Right,
and you sort of point out there it's already getting political, and it is a big deal politically, and we've heard it from the campaigns already, Maeve Reston, with Ted Cruz coming out just a short time ago. Let's take a listen to what he said.
It's a very sad development, and this is the consequence of the culture of the Trump campaign, the abusive culture. When you have a campaign that is built on personal insults, on attacks, and now physical violence, that has no place in a political campaign. It has no place in our democracy. And I think it is a really unfortunate development, but I do think it helps clarify for the voters what the Trump campaign is all about.
All right, Jeffrey, I'm going to get to you in just a second to get the Trump side of all of this, but I want to first look at the big picture of the other responses from campaigns from Maeve. What else have they said, Maeve?
Well, John Kasich's campaign also came out and said something similar, that this was not the kind of response or the kind of action that any presidential campaign should be taking, that it reflects the culture at the top, and that is why this is really such a big story. As just said, this is a misdemeanor. It's very unusual that you would have a campaign manager involved in this kind of alleged altercation with a reporter. But this is a big deal because it builds into this larger narrative around Trump, that there is violence at his rallies, that he's encouraged it with certain statements saying that he'd pay for legal bills. And it's so interesting because Trump's instinct here has been to defend Corey Lewandowski over and over again, to question the reporter's story, and standing by Corey Lewandowski in this when most crisis managers would tell you, just fire your campaign manager and move on. It's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. It shows us a lot about Trump's leadership style and the way that he would govern, and I think voters will be looking at this in the broader sense in that way. And obviously, Corey will, deal with this in court and as a legal matter.
And it really goes to what we've seen the Trump campaign to sort of not back down, not apologize. And Jeff DeWitt, on that note, your boss, Donald Trump, says, look at the video. Nothing happened. Do you agree when you look at that video?
Well, yes, when you look at that, Michelle Fields, her initial statement, and that's what was being referred to earlier, her initial statement was that Corey tried to yank her to the ground. And I don't think you see anywhere in that video where anyone's trying to be yanked to the ground. And I think what's being left out here, there is a picture that you can find online that is taken from the front right before this happens. And you will see Michelle Fields, Donald Trump is walking by trying to exit the building. She lunges into his private space to try to stop him to ask a question. And she has a circular object. I don't know if it's a highlighter or something weird, but it looks syringe-like in her hand. That she's touching to Donald Trump. When you lunge out of a crowd towards a leading presidential candidate who has Secret Service protection and you touch an object, I think it's safe to say that you might get your arm grabbed.
Jack Toobin, you're raising your
eyebrows. Can I just say something as a reporter?
Yes, Maeve, jump in. I think a lot of us have
in that kind of In that kind of situation, that is the reason that Secret Service is there. That is their job, to see if there's any kind of threat to the candidate. And Secret Service agents, having dealt with them on multiple campaigns, generally have been well-trained, well-disciplined on how to hold reporters back, usually by kind of putting their arm in front of them. And it's the Secret Service that you would expect to step in if there was a threat to the candidate. That's why this is so unusual. It's not like there wasn't a Secret Service agent there. But obviously this campaign feels that, they've been under attack and they have a very different way of dealing with reporters than most presidential campaigns.
Right. You see what appears to be a Secret Service agent on her left. Go ahead, Jeff. And then I want to get to Jeffrey Toobin after that because I see him raising his eyebrows. Jeff DeWitt.
Well, there's a misstatement, a lot of misstatements that, oh, this is the campaign or this in general. Keep in mind the Secret Service protection is only a few months old. And before that, Corey was what's called in politics the body man. I have a body man. He's actually over here with me right now, where we as candidates will travel with somebody who needs to protect us in case there are crazies. And Corey was also serving as a body man before, so he's been in a protective role before Secret Service, but she lunged out from a crowd towards a leading presidential candidate with something in her hand, and that keeps getting forgotten. And all it was somebody might have grabbed her arm to see what was in her hand, and now she says, oh, I was almost forcibly yanked to the ground. Remember, she was served with a cease and desist and let go by her former employer for this very incident. So even her former employer, another media outlet, did not believe her.
Okay, so Jeffrey Toobin, Lewandowski, would this be a defense for him to be exonerated from the charges? Exactly what laid out.
Well, if it's true that he's protecting Donald Trump from a vicious assault from a reporter from Breitbart, which seems extremely unlikely, that would be a defense. But look, there's let's step back. There are two ways this could be approached. One is to say, look, this was a misunderstanding. We hope everybody's feelings aren't hurt. Let's move on. Or the Trump campaign appears to want to turn this into the O.J. case, and we can view, maybe we can get DNA tests, and, it just seems like this is a classic example of a combative response as opposed to a conciliatory response, and that is, I think, indicative of the campaign where this originated.
And Matthew Continetti, I want to bring you in. We don't want to leave you out here because I'm sure you have some thoughts to share on this.
I do.
We heard from the Cruz campaign saying that this is reflective of an abusive culture within the Trump campaign. Do you think that's fair?
I mean, Ted Cruz has a primary to win. Donald Trump has a primary to win. Let's not forget about that. He hasn't reached the magic number of 1237. And the problem for him that this Michelle Fields scandal represents is that it feeds into the idea that Donald Trump's campaign is a circus. And I think we've just started seeing that in the last few weeks, because remember, the previous controversy we were arguing over before this latest news broke was the fight between Trump and the Cruz camps over who insulted whose wife first. That's a circus, and Republican voters, especially the ones in Wisconsin who have that kind of Midwestern nice sensibility, they're going to blanch at it. And so I think this is a political problem for Donald Trump. I mean, forget about the criminal issues involved. It's a political problem. He has to get to 1237 delegates, or else he's going to face a contested convention where his nomination is not guaranteed.
Well, no doubt about it. The primary in Wisconsin's a big deal. Go ahead, Maeve.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say that there are donors who feel that this particular storyline is their most effective path against Donald Trump. You remember that when there was violence at his rally in Chicago, one of the anti-Trump groups put out an ad around that. They definitely want to create this kind of narrative and get those people in the Midwest thinking about it in Wisconsin. So this is definitely not something that's going to go away. This is going to be with us for some time during this campaign.
If I could just make one point about the political side of it, how many times in this campaign have we said, oh, this controversy, this thing he said about John McCain or Megyn Kelly, this is really bad. And every time one of these controversies has come up, Trump's popularity has gone up. I don't see any reason why this one is any different, especially since it's a relatively minor sideshow, not even involving Trump himself.
Let me just ask you this quickly.
Just to respond to Jeff really quickly, I think there is a tipping point has been reached. Normally, I would agree completely with Jeff, but I think something happened with the fight over Heidi Cruz and Melania Trump that I know a lot of Republicans, and the Republicans that I know are saying, what happened here? And so here we just feed into another news cycle where Donald Trump's campaign is extremely combative. You have accusations of violence. You have accusations of harsh actions and language toward women. Eventually, it catches up with you. And I think we may be starting to see it now.
And no doubt about it, this will all be addressed tonight in the CNN town hall. Jeffrey Toobin, Jeff DeWitt, Maeve, Matthew, thank